So I guess maybe Charlie, Joey, if you'd like to talk a little bit more about the expectation for the visas that we've got looking forward.
Sure. So Charlie, you kind of created this chart. This is something that you generally put together. Maybe you can just give us a breakdown of where that 145 employment-based total, where's that assumption coming from? And then you can go through and break it down. This is the number of visas that are allocated this upcoming fiscal year for EB-5.
Right. The worldwide employment limit is a minimum of 140,000. And to that, any unused family sponsored numbers from the previous year are added to that. The State Department should not have more than 5 to 10,000 unused family numbers during fiscal 2025. Therefore, to be safe, I made an assumption that there would only be 5,000 unused. Therefore, those 5,000 are added to the 140 limit, deriving the 145 overall. The EB-5 category will get 7.1% of that 145,000 limit, which works out to 10,295 numbers. The reserved categories under the Reform and Integrity Act says that the reserved categories get 32% of the overall limit, resulting in the 3,294. And those numbers are then split 20% to rural, 10% to high unemployment, and 2% to infrastructure, with the remaining balance of 7,001 numbers being made available to rest of world applicants, those who filed prior to the Reform and Integrity Act.
And so this shows that, again, come October 1st, 2025, there's going to be a whole new group of visa numbers, and we're going to see some ping-ponging of the final action dates at that time. And then the other thing I would say is with the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act, there's also the carryover provisions. And so it's depending on how many reserve visa numbers are used, there could be a pretty big waterfall of more numbers that can be made available to the unreserved category, and possibly up to, 10,000 visa numbers in fiscal year 26 in the unreserved category. That's a big number. That is a lot of EB-5 investors and wives and husbands and children that can get pushed through in fiscal year 2026 with that number amount.
Absolutely.
So, again, the bumpiness, I think you said it really well, Pete. The bumpiness sort of along the way has been tough to ride, but hopefully at this point things are getting a little bit smoother, and now we can at least plan for any other bumps ahead in the road.
Yeah. And that's all that we can try to do for people is try to help them to plan as they're looking forward and to just know what the landscape is looking like. And Joe, maybe if you want to touch on briefly, the ping ponging that we talked about, right? Because I think when we talk about potential volatility in terms of maybe some of these dates that we might be looking at and whether or not like there are a couple factors, in terms of where these allocations come from. And so maybe to just further clarify like what some of this ping ponging means and what could or could not, cause some of these date of final action to actually present themselves or not.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I guess one of the big reasons why something would ping pong is what we just mentioned here in the slide is the new allocation of immigrant visas. So that opens it up significantly. Another reason why something would ping pong is the way that the State Department is allocating those numbers, I guess, on a monthly basis. And that I guess gets to what, are we giving too many to China at this time or in India as opposed to the rest of the world? And I think a third really gets into the nitty-gritty of this new EB-5 law. And we go back to that January visa bulletin note, where I knew I had it in the right spot the first time, Pete. Ay, ay, ay. We had it in the where we're saying like, look, yeah, there are going to be final action dates potentially in the reserve categories. And because of that, that may cause individuals from the rest of the world to use the unreserved visa numbers. And if that happens and it starts happening a significant amount, that will reduce the number of unreserved visa numbers that are available to pre-RIA China and India. So that could put more pressure on ping-ponging effects then when that happens in the future, because in October, when the new visa allocation comes out, there will not be enough demand for those unreserved numbers by those reserved visa individuals. I know I'm getting really technical right here, so I feel like I should just shut up before I'm dug into myself a hole. But the fact of the matter is that we don't see that demand. We don't know what that's going to be, but we know people are going to do it in the future, and that's going to cause visa numbers to shift again. And it'll just be another reason for a ping pong effect. I'm sorry if I totally butcher that answer, trying to make it clean, but I blew it.
No, not in the least. It was a clean. It is a complicated equation, right?
Yes.
With so many different factors that come into it. And I think that the best you can do is to know what the factors are that could be leading towards some of these potential outcomes, right? And I think one of the ones that we've talked about a lot, and it's part of the reason why we brought back up the January visa bulletin aspect of it again, is that one of the factors is still getting people documentarily prepared to get to state to make sure that they're actually able to get allocated those numbers. And it's what we talked about 6 months ago, that this is what is holding up, and this is what is keeping some of these things in the status that they are. That all these reserve categories remain current. And it's not a lack of demand. It's not a lack of interest. It is, just potentially getting people moving to that point, right? Which is why, not putting words into you guys' mouths, when we talked last, this is why we had the assumptions that we had in terms of when, we could be looking at potential, dates, or when this footnote that came onto the bulletin could actually come to fruition, right? But, now, as we look at this now, as we continue to roll this forward, we're still in a position where all of these categories remain current. So, that the fact hasn't changed, that it has been taking time for people to get to get to actually use these visas that are being allocated to them. And so, it continues to push that time frame out in terms of if or when people might be able to make use of these reserve visa numbers.